Welcome back to the Camper Machine podcast. This is a bit of a throwback to a financial series that I recorded with my good friend Kenny Brook from Click, who is the payment processor of choice for many summer camps. And he helps illustrate and guide people through all the details of what's actually happening inside your merchant accounts with your credit cards and your payment processing and ACH and paying staff and all of the things. So this is the first of a 4-part series. I hope you check it out and enjoy. All right, Kenny Brook from Click, live in the studio with Eric Wittenberg here from Camper Machine. Welcome to the very first episode of Camp Business Financials, Money Moves at Summer Camp.
Well said.
So this is, if you're definitely just tuning in, this is our very first episode. We are about to kick off a fascinating conversation between Kenny, who's been a summer camp director and payment processor, ACH, credit card, paycheck provider, to all things financial to summer camps. How long have you been doing that?
13 years in the payment space.
For 13
years in the camp space prior to that.
Yeah. So you have two sides of the same coin in different worlds, really. And similarly to you, I've had a background as a summer camp operator, starting an overnight camp and running it for 8 or 9 years, and growing up in the day camp. And then now on the flip side of things, I do marketing, automation, and consulting just exclusively for summer camps with Camper Machine. So that's why we're having this party. And you were, of course, the payment provider. You're the solutions, all financial solutions, all things for the Berkshire Soccer Academy, which is the girls' soccer camp that my wife and Dan Zinkel and I started. And I have to confess, I am the noob at this conversation. Like we've prepared for this. We've spoken for hours in advance of this. We have notes. I still feel like a total noob talking about this.
Oh, I think you need to give yourself more credit. You pick up fast.
And that's one of the reasons why I think we're having this conversation is, you called me probably 10 years ago at this point to say, hey, you got a chargeback. What happened? Mm-hmm. And that's the wool started slowly creeping up over my eyes. I was like, wait a second, there's things that happened beyond once I get a parent to complete the camper app. And that's all I cared about starting a camp. It's like, okay, you started the camper app, I can make you finish. And did not think about this financial world. So I guess maybe, do you want to spend a couple of minutes addressing kind of why is it important to have a payment provider or solutions? Like, what do you call yourself? Because you're like just the Jedi. You're like the Yoda of financials.
Payment processors. That's what we are. That's we help you move money, and that's why does this matter for camp? Camps are just completely misunderstood by the financial industry. Just honestly, they're specifically misunderstood because of the nature of a camp transaction. It's taken up to a year in advance. It's never a face-to-face transaction with a card present. It's a large transaction typically. It's a large dollar amount. These are the reasons why banks and processors and American Express all just really don't understand the nature of camp. They don't get that the camp parent and the camp owner and directors have an amazing relationship. It's a trust relationship, and that's just misunderstood. So that's really what's key and important in this world of camp is that the banks don't understand what you do and how you do it and how it's important.
That's a really interesting, I never, even in all the time we've spoken about this, I didn't get this image of like on a transactional view to a bank, buying camp looks like you're buying something on layaway. Right. which is on the totally not what exists for most summer camps. It's like the ultimate trusted and life enriching experience. It's an investment, not like buying a toy you can't afford, for the holidays, like 6 months in advance.
Exactly. The banks just look at it like this. It's a large transaction. unsecured, unknown. And it's like, no, this relationship between a parent and their child and the camp industry is misunderstood.
All right, so you're the processing partner for a camp. Why and how do people find you? Like, how does, so we started a camp and we chose a camp database, and then we kind of started going through you automatically through CampMinder. But aside from, because that's the questions people ask you on the summer camp Facebook pros question, the questions that come up ad nauseum are, I need a database. How come no one's saying I need a payment processor?
Yes. When you create a bank account, you kind of assume certain things exist as a business. If I've got a bank account, well, then there's a line of credit, and there's, I want to accept credit cards, or I want to accept checks, or I want to accept cryptocurrency. You know what I mean? These are just things you assume in the relationship. And frankly, it shouldn't be assumed. You really need to, work with processors. When you choose an insurance company or an HR support or an accounting firm, these are all trusted relationships, and payment processing is no different. And it's so easy to just go by default. Oh, we use PayPal. Oh, we use Square. Oh, we use, our POS system, our hospitality system. And yet there's these nuances that can make it go south real fast, and no better evidence than last year with the closures of our industry and COVID, where these things that we always knew were a concern became real evident, real prevalent.
Don't go too far there. You got to leave a cliffhanger. That's going to be episode 3. What happens to, because there are a lot of, that's just a teaser. It's your first time here, but come back for more. We'll get into the nitty gritty of some workout plans that you had to work through with real camp operators throughout the pandemic, and all of the obstacles, and how that whole kind of landscape unfolded slowly.
Yeah.
So before, we want to get into some brass tacks and cover the basics. One of the things that, we were just mentioning kind of beforehand is that I bet there are 30-year camp professionals that have transacted millions and millions of dollars at their entities that have no idea how it actually happens, and that they might want to know. So for a couple of minutes, can you just explain the payment cycle that you've kind of explained to me? And I'll actually map it out. So if you're able to watch the video, if you're on YouTube, you'll get the benefit of this. And if you're just listening to the podcast, we'll kind of talk it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go through it. Again, we all know what that looks like here's my credit card number, take the payment. But what's really happening there is you have the parent, we call them the card holder, right? The parent who's got their card, and their card is actually provided by an issuing bank. And the issuing bank is the one that generates that card and creates a relationship to your camp family. And so there's a lot of big names out there that issue these cards, but that's the relationship to the camp family that says, we're going to extend you this credit through this card, and you can use this to make payments in person over the phone. So that's the issuing bank. Well, the camp business.
I want to be clear that so I'm going to kind of explain it as you're saying it. I have drawn up here kind of on a whiteboard. There's really 2 halves. So behind the camp family, there's this bank that's literally and figuratively standing behind the card to fulfill the contract. So there's the issuing bank and the camp family are on the same side of the transaction.
Yes, exactly. And likewise, the camp business, the camp owner has a relationship to a bank that is supporting them in this relationship. And that's called the acquiring bank. And so it's essential that you as a business have an acquiring bank that supports you, that understands your business, that allows that transaction through these card brands and this card association. Collectively, that's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover. That's the that's the card association. So that's what connects these 2 sides of the issuing bank and the acquiring bank. And the essential element there for the camp business is that you have a relationship, you have an advocate, and that's who we are as a payment processor. We're the relationship, the conduit between the camp business and that acquiring bank. Because the acquiring banks don't get really involved. They're just responsible. They're necessary to have that relationship to the card brands. So when that transaction happens, when that camp family presents a card, what's happening is that transaction occurs. And on the business side, it says, hey, is this a good card? They have adequate credit. Can you authorize this transaction? And within a few microseconds, that response comes back and says, yes, approved. You're good for this transaction. And that's really what it is. It's this quick communication that says they have the credit, they have the card, they're ready to take it. Business says, I want to take that money. So when that transpires,
this is on behalf. This is happening instantaneously. So when someone clicks apply and they've looked at their deposit that they're going to pay and then they're going to run through on the card, the acquiring bank will verify with the issuing bank the fees associated, that they're going to cover it and accept it before you get that green screen that says success. Now share this on Facebook.
Exactly. So they're just validating that information. They're verifying the information and they're saying, yep, we're good to go. Now, money hasn't moved though. That's all that is. It's an approval. It's an authorization. So then what has to follow is that settles, that completes. And that usually happens overnight, where then the money starts moving to support that transaction. But it's really important to note that whole process, though it's electronic, it's full of risk management, oversight, underwriting. All of these factors are constantly being analyzed for, okay, that transaction happened, but was it valid? Was it justified? Was it real? Is it potential fraud, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all going on in this process.
So that 2-day delay and then transfer is, why people watch their bank accounts and verify what's happening. And the bank account is different than what's in the ledger on the camp database side.
Absolutely.
Most of the time in all the big databases, that's the delay.
Yep, because it's approved, but it's not moved anything yet. It's got to go through all this vetting, both electronic and sometimes even a manual process at the risk manager level at the acquiring banks and the issuing banks. Both of them are watching what's going on to say, is this really good?
Wait, a manual process for real? Someone's verifying like with eyeballs?
Absolutely. And why does that even happen in this world? Well, if you have 3 children going to an 8-week summer camp, that's a pretty large transaction. It's an unusually large transaction. And that kind of outside of the norm or outside of the normal parameters is what flags. And actually, someone's out there looking at it and questioning it and asking about it.
Hold on a second. Exactly who is looking at it? From which circle here? We've drawn the camp business acquiring bank and we've run the issuing bank. Who exactly are you talking about that does the looking?
That's a great point. Typically, it's both sides of that equation, the issuing bank and the acquiring bank. So, as someone who makes purchases, you get those fraud alerts, you get those calls. Hey, did you mean to do this? From your issuing bank, checking on you and checking on the spend activity. Well, the same thing's happening on the acquiring side. And you want that to be happening. As a camp business owner and director, you want to know that your relationship's watching out for you to make sure that was an intentional transaction.
So what's happening, I'm just kind of drawing in a little layer here. Excuse the scribble. I'm going to just put the fraud prevention layer. Hopefully it is there on both sides.
And what's essential here is that the representative, the payment processor you're working with, understands you, understands your business, and understands what is normal and consistent behavior, as opposed to, whoa, Houston, we have a problem. Stop the money. Don't let that happen.
Which you don't want to have happen to your camp operations.
No, because it's a business interruption if that's stopped, right?
So we've got now these two kind of balanced sides of the payment cycle of camp business, camp family, the people behind the relationship. They each have their own bank and each a layer of fraud protection, verifying that the promise of the card. What's this? There's another box that you had me draw on here ahead of time that kind of is on both sides. What is that?
Well, we talk about that being the processor, or VisaNet, or this huge ultimate entity of the card brand association, because there's these different processors that run these transactions through, but they're all within these, Visa being the biggest, Amex being number two, MasterCard, and then Discover. That's the world that is in between these two sides of our acquiring and issuing, or business and consumer.
Got it. So this is Visa, MasterCard, and Amex.
And Discover.
And Discover.
And they write the rules.
What's
they
in your
create
wallet?
the rules of the rules of the game, the rules of play. They determine what that looks like. Because again, Eric, this is a promise to pay. It's a credit product. This is literally the camp saying, I'm going to offer these services, and the parent saying, I want to use these services. I'm going to pay for what's to come so far in advance.
Yeah. So for those listening, not watching, I just expanded that card association of Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover to go all the way across, because really that's the context nobody really sees in the use of these cards, that we're playing their game, where they own both sides as a card. That's what you're saying, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
And so I think what we're going to talk about later on in subsequent episodes are the kind of I don't know, I don't want to call them mines, but danger zones of ways where you can get tripped up within kind of the card brand associations, things that they don't like to see, that can create problems for camp families and camp businesses, right?
Absolutely. That's the opportunity here for the learning, for the understanding, and for how to really prepare yourself for success.
Cool. So I'm going to stop the screen share in a second, but we'll definitely take this image and put it up with some notes for the show notes. So if you're listening and you're curious about what we've been drawing and kind of conceptually you'd like to see more, you can check out the show notes. There will definitely be an image there for you to share with your executive director, so they understand the importance too, because you definitely need to have more than one person understand the big picture.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Like you said, there's so many assumptions. There's so many things we think are true. It's like, well, they made the payment. Isn't it always good? Isn't it a guarantee?
All right. So one of the things that you made kind of a very specific note about in our kind of outline here is that there's a big disclaimer with the card, the payment cycle, the card relationships, that the transaction is a credit for future services. Correct. And that it's not the same as tender. It's not cash in hand exchanged. But Kenny, isn't it really all the same? I Apple paid, I swiped, chipped. What's the big deal? Like, what's the difference?
Right. We make payments all day long and don't think about questioning them or challenging them or disputing them. It's
one click on Amazon. It's so easy.
I bought it. I got it. I bought it. I got it. Well, guess what? Sometimes you bought it and you didn't get it, or what you got wasn't what you expected. And as a consumer, this entire world is benefiting the consumer. It's literally stacked against the camp owners, because it's just so consumer centric. It's all about the consumer spend and having that consumer use my card and spend with my card and get my benefits. And so the whole thing is so focused on the consumer purchasing and them being satisfied that we can't just take for granted it's good and always good, like cash.
Are you saying that cash is an irreversible payment?
Exactly. You got cash. How are you going to get it back? You got to take some serious action to get cash back. But
we're not saying that it's an irreversible payment, but just to be clear, because someone will go comment. But
that's so true.
The another way to say what I think you're saying about the power being totally skewed towards the consumer in the actual process that we just outlined is that it's very easy for a card user, a camp family using a card, to reject or dispute a charge And it's way harder for a camp family that has written a check or cash to dispute the transaction because they've already given the actual dollars and there is no third party relationship.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. And it's not only easy, it's easy to put into a category that makes sense in the card brand world. So it says, hey, I didn't receive services. Well, of course you didn't receive services because camp hasn't even happened yet. Well, but if you have a deadline of canceling camp to open up space for somebody else of April 1st, and you get to April 15th and they're like, oh yeah, but I'm not going to send my child anymore. I'll just dispute it because I didn't get those services. You're not acknowledging that you took responsibility. The parents not acknowledging they took responsibility in signing up. They're like, my Amex will give it back to me.
So this is, I remember, I don't know if you remember the exact conversation. I remember the exact conversation we had when a parent left, canceled, they didn't even come. It was like just before they were supposed to arrive.
Yeah.
They requested a chargeback and they called and spoke to me and said, hey, I just told my banker to take my money back. We're not going to come. That's what's happening. Please, you can do whatever you want, basically. And I visualized it as like, we have a terms and conditions agreement that we think we have. We think it's ironclad because we had a lawyer look at it once at the beginning of every year even. And then the agreement that the banks or the cards associations have with their issuing banks cards is really just in a different land. And they don't speak, they're in different realms. And to go toe to toe and make them meet is a big lift in terms of time and money and energy, right?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's possible. And I've got some great success stories, but boy, do I have a lot of frustrating stories as well. Like I have all the evidence by, my camp director should prevail, and yet they don't because the rules are written by the card brands and they're really consumer facing.
So to do a little foreshadowing, what's going to come, because I think that we're kind of reaching the end of our intro episode. This is like great foundational work here, staff orientation, if you will, for the episode. This is pre-camp. So the things that can go wrong in that cycle that we just mentioned, we kind of had some anecdotal ones. What are the terms for them? And like, can we talk a little bit about the frequency of these? Like, how real is this? Because if you don't, these are things that when they come up, people aren't bragging about. No one's posting on LinkedIn like disputed 50 chargebacks this season. So let's and kind of wrapping up, let's discuss the things that can go wrong.
Sure.
and the likelihood. And for real summer camps, we're not talking about another industry. We're not talking about hucksters selling t-shirts in a parking lot at a sporting game. Like this is summer camp specific knowledge.
When I started 13 years ago, there were still quite a few camps that either didn't take credit cards or only took paper checks, or that due to the culture and the interest in their camp, they didn't have to go there. Well, that quickly went away because our world shifted into everything's purchased. Cash is diminishing. Cards are everything. Electronic payments. Pay. What's the convenience? The databases all support that as well. So you saw this huge shift into, well, I'm not. I can't turn away business. I got to accept payments, right? So the growth of credit card acceptance over the last 15 years is significant. And again, wasn't a major issue. Where it became an issue is, behavior dismissals, cancellations, people just getting, the parent being more entitled to, it's not convenient anymore. I'm just going to start shifting. So you saw more and more of this. I almost call it friendly fraud, right? I made that purchase, but
friendly fraud.
Whoa, I'm not responsible
Kenny.
For that, right?
Are you saying
fraudulent in there?
We have to clean this up because again, somebody's going to be like, Kenny is on there talking about fraud. Right. Because you said two terms that I think are technical, and I want to clarify it for all the listeners that have had less experience with these things.
Okay.
You said reversals and
Mhm.
cancellations. To me, those are terms that happen in the database when you change someone's status from enrolled to canceled. What
Mm.
does it mean to you on your payment cycle side?
So let's say in your terms and conditions, your camper application, you're very clear, as you mentioned, between the parent and the camp, what it means to enroll and what you're committing to and what you're promising to pay, right? So that's the agreement. That is
Yeah.
ultimately the agreement you have with your family about enrollment. Well, payments are just there to support that commitment. Well, in the payments world, that's supporting document, but it really is secondary to, I made a payment, did I get my goods and services? Right? That's really what the payment industry cares about. Did I get what I paid for? Not, am I honoring what I committed to? Am I honoring my contract or my agreement?
I'm going off script. I got to write this
Okay.
down because I think this is really significant. So
Yeah.
there's
Big
two,
distinction.
there's two worlds. There's what the camp director thinks that they see,
Yeah.
and then there's what the bank cards see.
Yeah. Oh, well
And,
said.
and we see, the handshake relationship
Mm.
of parents, and camp directors as an agreement that has the terms
Mhm.
as a subset in there. And then we're using the credit cards to achieve that.
Yes.
And on the bank side, they see a card holder that engaged with a merchant, and then they see, if taken to the appropriate place to dispute, then they'll see other terms and other, I'll put evidence here.
Exactly. They're looking for the evidence of the transaction. How much detail was provided? What did they agree to? What did they acknowledge? Did they have evidence of that acknowledgement? Did they have proof of receiving the service? Did the camper go to camp? Did they stay for the
Yes.
whole duration? Did they get what they
Was camp
were
delivered as
advertised?
promised, as advertised?
Right? Oh, they didn't go on that trip. They didn't have water skiing. They didn't have horseback. Didn't get what they were promised, right?
Yes. So
Totally different.
these two worlds, how many people
Mm.
deviate from the camp director view
Mhm.
of the relationship, and know that they can use their card to take advantage of the murky gray area of what is not in the bank card's view, but is in the camp director's view.
More and more every year. Camps that have never seen chargebacks started seeing them a few years ago. Camps that saw chargebacks on escalation, a higher percentage, a greater number. And then the last 2 years, the minute we have interruption of services, this went wild. And
When you say service interruptions and services, you're talking about COVID. You're
COVID.
talking about state regulators shutting
Health
down.
department, yep, not being able to operate, not being able to provide transportation and busing. Everything that disrupted it changed the landscape and created what was an unknown or a rarity to a significant issue.
All right. So this image, if you're listening, of the camp director relationship-based world, which is why we love camp, on one side, and the world of bank cards and the sort of gray area that can be intentionally stretched, perhaps, let's say, by parents that understand how to dispute a charge, because a lot of people just don't dispute them, or to take the channels. This is, to me, the main reason why every camp professional that's going to have oversight over the entity's financials has to understand this. This is the reason why you should come back and listen to the next 4 episodes of this micro series on, camp business financials. Like, what do you need to know about taking payments?
I'm going to take it even one more level. We've been talking about this being a consumer decision. The reality is the bank stepped in and did this without the consumers even asking for it. Yeah.
What?
Yep. On both sides of the house, we had the banks that were saying, whoa, getting way out in front of themselves, saying, are you really going to be able to operate in this current environment? And then we had the other side saying,
Wait. Hold on. You're telling me if I'm a day camp in a state that wasn't able to operate last year, and because I'm highly relational and on top of my marketing to my own families that are enrolled, I have everybody calm. I've got 500 kids and families, and they're all calm. They're with us. They're into like this family. We're going to stick it out. And whether we give you a credit or I have a plan I'm communicating about it at future time. You're saying that the acquiring bank, like my own bank,
so in some cases
raised flags, and
in some cases your own bank got really anxious and really concerned about all of the businesses that were future fulfillment, right? Their concerts, their cruises, their travel, their Airbnbs, their anything that was in the future, they got upset and anxious about and demanded more information. And then it also happened on the issuing side. The banks that issued those cards to the families didn't wait for the families to contest it or get concerned. Even though you kept them calm, they went, I don't think you're going to fulfill on that. We're going to challenge this. Wow. One of the biggest card brands did this so significantly that there's a whole online podcast I believe Jay Jacobs did to describe his experience with one card brand that held all the money going into last summer. Held all the money, wouldn't distribute the money because they were so anxious they wouldn't fulfill on it. Huge concern. So
this is exactly deeper than you said from my diagram of the two worlds that we think we're living in, because the bank world should be exponentially larger because they actually have way more power than we realize. Because that's really the big takeaway. So we're living in a smaller sub world. We think that we're managing the relationships and the financials well, but really at the end of the day, we can have the rug pulled out from underneath us. Wow.
What's that?
Even though we prepared for this, I still learned something new. This is it's
every day.
This is always exciting to kind of dig into these details and use cases. So we're going to have to wrap things up. Thank you so much for the time, Kenny. This is always insightful. And we'll catch you next time. Come on back for the next episode. We'll dig into some deeper use cases and get into some nitty-gritty things that you need to know to make sure that you're managing your camp financials to operate your business as healthfully as you can. Is healthfully a word? Well, you're going to run a good camp business. That's the bottom line.
With advocacy, right?
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye. And that was the Camper Machine Podcast, Money Moves at Summer Camp Part 1. Stay tuned for Parts 2 through 4 and check out campermachine.com if you have questions or want to learn more about our marketing automation and consulting services.